Okay, next topic is about, I'm going to talk about, linear search and collecting and counting matches. So let's take a look at the linear search. Definition of linear search is a linear search inspect elements in sequence until match is found. So basically, let's say assume that you have a list, right? Let's say the values, and the list you have a sequence of integers. So to find, basically this code is trying to find the value which is greater than 100, right? And the first one is try to collect the elements, right? Which is, call all the elements which are greater than 100, the limit, and then store them in the list code result. So collecting all matches. The second one is about, let's say this code snippet is trying to find the number of matches, right? So basically try to count matches. Okay, so example is this. Example is let's say you have the values. This is the name of the list, and then you have 80 and 110 and 77 and 200, right? So you scan all the elements in the list, and your goal is, if you find a value, or you can find an element whose value value is greater than 100, right? And that's your match. And then you try to collect that result, or you try to count the second code. Basically, the second code is basically trying to find the number of matches. So in this case, it's a result. It's a list. So it's 80 is not greater than 100, right? So it's no match. 110 is greater than 100, so there's a match. And the 77 is less than 100, is no match. And 200 is greater than 100, so there's a match. So the result is going to be 110 and 200, right? And then the count, right? The count is how many matches? 2 matches, right? So your count should be 2. So if you look at the first example and the second example, they are pretty much same. So I can combine these 2 code into one, right? So everything is exactly the same. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to combine these 2 the code. There is indentations. I'm trying to combine these 2. And then there is an indentation here, right? And so the counter is a 0, right? So let's say I have this code right after the result. So counter is a 0. Since I don't have a space, I'm going to put it on the right side. But this counter is a 0 is right after the result is empty space, right after this line. So right here, the counter is equal to 0, right? And then I'm going to say here, right after the append, counter is equal to the counter plus 1, this one, basically. So this is like, so this code is to trying to find the number of matches at the same time, this code can collect all matches and store them in the result. Okay, so let's just follow. Let's say, just as an example, the values, right? Values. By the way, you use the keyword in. So whenever you use the keyword in, you have to put the name of reference variables, right? Which refers to a list, right? So let's say the values is a list. I'm going to use the previous example, 80, 110, 77, and 200. And then you have index 0, 1, 2, and 3, right? But since we are using the keyword in, you really don't need to use this index, right? But I just wrote them anyway. So let's just follow. So limit is 100, and the result is empty string. And then in the for loop, right? Element in value. So the first element in value, so this is value, right? So the first loop, your element is what? Your element is 80. So 80, right? And if the element is greater than, limit is 100, so this is 100, really, 100, right? So is that 80 is greater than 100, then it's going to execute these two lines of code, result, append, and increment counter by 1. But since this is what? This is a false, and those two lines are not going to be executed. So next the for loop, and then the next the element in value. So the element now is 110. So element is now what? So instead of element, I just put, I'm gonna use E, right? But this E means element. Now is 110, right? Is that 110? Is that one? If 110 is greater than 100 limit, is it true? Yes, this is a true. In such a case, these two lines of code is going to be executed. So the result, so you append that element, which is 110, to the result. At the very beginning, the result is empty string, right? And empty list. So now your result becomes what? You append 110. And your counter is going to be increment by 1. So the counter is initially what? Counter is initially 0. Now the counter is increment by 1. The counter is equal to counter plus 1. Right? Done. Next for loop. The element is what now is 77. And the 77 is greater than 100. This becomes false. Right? So nothing will be executed. And then the next for loop. Now the element is what now is a 200, which is the last element in the list. So it's a 200. And the 200 is greater than 100. Yes, it's a true. So these two lines is going to be executed. So you're going to append the element 200 to the result. So result is now becomes, you append 200 to the end, right? Result. And then the counter is counter plus 1. So your counter is initial, now is 1, right? Previously is 1, to increment counter by 1, so counter becomes 2, right? So let's implement this. Python, right? And Python. Okay, file new. So limit is 100, and the result empty string, and for elements. So by the way, this is just the variable name. So you can put element or you can E. So let's say I just put the E, since variable name in values. Oh, I forgot to put the values. So the values is what? 80, 110, 77, 200, right? So this is like any variable name. So it could be element in the example, or you can simply E. So E in values. This time I'm gonna just use the E instead of elements. Then, since it's just variable name, if E is greater than limit, which is 100, and then result is dot append, and I'm going to append E, this guy, right? E and E. Then I'm going to increment counter by 1. The counter is equal to counter plus 1, right? So let's just, once the for loop is done, let's just print result, and then let's just print counter, right? So now when you run this, let's say run module, and okay, and then I'm gonna say what? I'm gonna say matches list. Oops. The counter is not defined. Okay. So they said they're complaining what? The counter is not defined, right? Yes. So when the Python compiler look at this counter the very first time, and they don't know the value, so that's why it's complaining. The mistake that I made was what? I did not initialize a counter, right? So I have to say the counter initially is 0. Right? Now I think I'm fine. Let's just run one more time. Okay, good. Now everything's fine. So the result, as you can see, is going to print what? 110 and 200. So these are the matches, right? So you put those values in the result list. Initially it was empty. And then how many matches? 1 and 2, right? So 1 and 2. So that's why the counter is now becomes 2, and that's the result. So I'm going to end my lecture here on collecting and counting matches.